Hello and welcome back to Random Vids. So, looks like we're doing more SpongeBob today. And whew, we are really chugging through all of these because this is the last one. Besides ranking all seasons, but this is the last one where we get to talk about the episodes. And whew, there is no denying that the last three seasons of SpongeBob are really good, and I'm so happy that the creators of the show awoken from their decade of sleep and finally realized what went wrong with the show. And they finally got back to work on three very good seasons with a lot of very good episodes. There is so many episodes that, it's as much as the original three seasons, I think. Heck, if not even more. Like I said, when I talked about the worst episodes of these three seasons, I couldn't even find, 10 terribly bad episodes, just because, even the very worst episode, doesn't compare to any of some of the worst stuff we got from seasons 4 through 8. So, now we get to chat about the top 10 best episodes of seasons 10, 11, and 12. And this is going to be the last SpongeBob top 10. And I hope you all are enjoying these because they're pretty fun to make. If you have another TV show that you want me to do in mind, whether if it's top 10 or rankings, let me know down in the comments because I've done both before. Like I've done Pup Star, Pup Academy, the 101 Dalmatians TV show, and I think that's it. I tried Bluey last year, but I got copyright, so I think I'm going to have to do what I did with SpongeBob if I was ever going to do Bluey again. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. I hope you all enjoy this video of the top 10 best SpongeBob episodes, seasons 10, 11, and 12. Number 10 would go to Snooze You Lose. Looks like we get to start off with a fun SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward episode from Season 10. So Squidward is going to try out for his clarinet. Unfortunately, he can't sleep. So he goes for a long walk and ends up in SpongeBob and Patrick's house. Well, in SpongeBob's house. He falls asleep there. Unfortunately, though, he doesn't end up waking up the next morning. So SpongeBob and Patrick try to get him to wake up, but unfortunately they're unsuccessful. So they end up crawling inside of Squidward to control himself. Patrick will control his arms and legs, and SpongeBob will control his brain, I guess. So then they clumsily make their way to the Philharmonic, whatever it's called, to perform the music, I guess. And then there's the strict judge there who, you can't do anything, I guess, bad without him cringing, I guess. They do make it work, and they make Squidward play good music. However, Squidward wakes up and starts taking back over the body and spits SpongeBob and Patrick out. Squidward realizes that the band guy liked him, so he tries to play again, but then ends up getting kicked out with the clarinet tied on his head. This one is a simple yet fun Season 10 episode. It's just really funny, and it's just one of those good old SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward episodes. You gotta love when episodes do it the right way. I love the ways that SpongeBob and Patrick try to find to get Squidward awake, and then any moment with them walking to the Philharmonic is hilarious. Overall, it's a good Season 10 episode, and it makes it on my top 10 list. Let's move on to number 9, which is Bubble Bass's Tab. You gotta love how after many seasons of Bubble Bass randomly disappearing, he now has returned, not just as a side character, but almost as a main character at this point. We got a lot more episodes focused on him as a character, and I actually really like that because Bubble Bass is such an interesting character, and it's nice seeing him have his own episodes. Anyway, so this one, for some reason, the first time I watched it, I thought it was just okay, but then when I rewatched it again, I was like, wait, this is actually hilariously funny. I believe it's when Bubble Bass doesn't want to pay his tab, so SpongeBob and Squidward end up chasing him around just for him to pay his tab. So they end up going to his house where they play this fantasy type of game with Bubble Bass to try to get him to pay his tab. We see a bunch of hilarious things happen, like playing sword fight with Bubble Bass randomly, and then Bubble Bass's mom just shows up out of nowhere and starts dancing with Squidward. It's the most random, yet funny stuff ever, and this is stuff you expect to see in Season 12. I kind of forget how the episode ends. I think he pays the like I said, I've only seen this episode twice. But I think, well, I don't know. All I know is that it ends at the Krusty Krab. Overall, this is a classic good Season 12 episode, and any moment with Bubble Bass's mother in it is just automatically better. Because if you think Bubble Bass is funny, then you'll love Bubble Bass's mom as well. Anyway, nothing much I really have to say. This one's definitely one of the best episodes. So let's move on to number 8, which is Cookie Cooks. Another good Season 12 episode. So if you haven't guessed already, Mr. Krabs loves Mrs. Puff. They've both been dating since Season 2's Krusty Love, which is another awesome episode. And Mr. Krabs is always cheap, as you know. Mrs. Puff has enough, and Mr. Krabs says, "No, wait, I'll make it your next meal a very good meal. It will be the best fine dining you'll ever see." And, of course, it's just in Mr. Krabs' house. And then the cooks are, of course, none other than SpongeBob and Squidward. And I think Patrick shows up as well. I forget, I just know it's SpongeBob and Squidward. Because, I mean, of course it is. Because Mr. Krabs isn't going to hire no fancy cook. In some episodes, like Hello Bikini Bottom and, like, the drive-thru episode, Mr. Krabs' cheapness really gets, like, annoying. But this one, it doesn't get annoying at all. Unfortunately, though, SpongeBob and Squidward aren't really the best cooks out there, and they keep running into problems, and Mrs. Puff keeps getting hungrier and hungrier and hungrier. So Mrs. Puff goes insane and literally will eat anything that she can find at this point. You know what? I really love how we're out of this stupid one-dimensional era, because characters like Mrs. Puff were really boring in this one-dimensional era that we had. She just was the typical boating teacher who got annoyed at SpongeBob in every episode. But now it's actually nice seeing her, like, get insane sometimes and actually be nice and have fun and just... I love Mrs. Puff so much better. Same with, like, Larry the Lobster. He was just the big show-off back in, like, the earlier seasons or even... and, of course, mid-SpongeBob. But now he has a lot more personality. It's way better than before. I think both Larry and Mrs. Puff were almost pretty one-dimensional in even the classic seasons. Mrs. Puff was the boating teacher, and Larry was the show-off. But now in these new seasons, both of these characters got new, fresh personalities, and I like them a lot better. So SpongeBob accidentally ends up getting in an oven, so then he ends up turning into, I guess, cooked sponge, and of course Mrs. Puff wants to eat him. I do kind of forget how the ending of the episode goes, but, like I said, it's Season 12, I've only seen it twice, but I just remember it's just such a silly, insanely funny, chaotic episode. And I love it how modern seasons are more fast-paced rather than just slowly waiting around like we would for Season 6. Like, I am so glad we are past that point. Anyway, Cookie Cooks, definitely one of the best episodes. And, this one is so good. And we're only at number 8. So let's move on to number 7, which is Bottle Burglars. It's so refreshing and nice to get an actually good SpongeBob and Squidward episode. After getting crap like Choir Boys and Good Neighbors, this is a welcome return. Anyway, so SpongeBob and Squidward have to clean out the safe. You know, the one that has the Krabby Patty formula in it. However, it accidentally ends up getting thrown out, and Plankton ends up taking it again. So SpongeBob and Squidward don't want to tell Mr. Krabs when they finally find out that it's missing. Instead, during the night, they want to try to sneak into the Krusty Krab to steal the formula back. A bunch of funny moments happen in the process, and they almost make it until they end up getting kicked out of the chum bucket. And when they finally tell Mr. Krabs, he makes it look simple, because all he does is punches a hole in the wall and he gets it out. Somehow he knows how to punch through a safe, so okay. You gotta love seeing SpongeBob and Squidward just have an episode focused on them together, and it's actually really good. I also love seeing the different rooms in the chum bucket as well, like the bedroom and the bathroom. A lot of rooms that we don't really ever get to see. And I mean, you gotta love sleepwalking Karen as well. And Spot's in this episode. Spot was strangely not in Season 10, but he has returned in Season 11 plus. Overall, this is a really good episode of Season 10, and it's such a funny one as well. Now let's move on to number 6, which is SpongeBob in Random Land. Heck yeah, if we're going to get an episode that's ripping off of one of my favorites from Season 7, Squidward in Clarinet Land, then of course it's going to make it on the top 10 best. As I said before, I love the mysterious type of episodes, so of course SpongeBob in Random Land is a very mysterious one. And also, you gotta love how it's both SpongeBob and Squidward, which makes another fun SpongeBob-Squidward episode. Basically, SpongeBob and Squidward have to deliver a Krabby Patty to someone in Random Land. How do they get to so-called Random Land? By walking around randomly, which is so random and so funny. A bunch of random and funny things happen, and all of a sudden they see a guy that looks like Mr. Krabs, so they start chasing him. And just like how they got in Random Land, they randomly get out of Random Land while following this weird Mr. Krabs guy. Oh, but it's not Mr. Krabs at all, it's just a guy who was wondering where his delivery was, who looks like Mr. Krabs. So SpongeBob and Squidward successfully delivered their delivery, and the episode ends. Such a good episode. I think it's better than Squidward in Clarinet Land just because of how much more creative it is and just how much funnier it is. You gotta love how Squidward's playing along and, well, I guess how SpongeBob is like being the creative guy and Squidward's playing along. I don't know what the words are. The whole creativity on how random they can get just really is just so much fun to see. And then of course there's the infinite door scene where Squidward's opening a bunch of doors. And at one time, actually, believe it or not, Squidward actually opened the door to literal Squidward creepypasta with red bloodshot eyes. Yes, that was literally in this episode, until it got banned, I guess, and now it's just baby Squidward instead. It's kind of interesting, though, I'm not gonna lie. Overall, this is a really good episode, and it's, yet again, just one of my favorites. Probably not just one of my favorites in Season 12, but one of my favorites maybe of all time. Maybe top 20. Let's move on to number 5, which is Teacher's Pests. Wow, another Mrs. Puffin episode cracks this list. It's simple. Mr. Krabs and Plankton are out doing stupid stuff as usual, and this time they have to go to boating school for wrecking each other. And of course the fight continues there, and of course SpongeBob is also there because why not? And you gotta love the video that Mrs. Puff shows them as well, which is basically what not to do while driving. And of course SpongeBob is going to be the bad driver. So now it's finally time for them to drive. And of course Mr. Krabs and Plankton just crash into SpongeBob. It was funny to see, and I love how an apple just randomly rolls out of Mrs. Puff's mouth. And you gotta love how at the end the two drive up the tower to prove who's the better driver, and then they both crash and fall. And all SpongeBob has to do is lightly touch one of the cars, and all of a sudden a big explosion happens. And all three of them end up in the hospital and end up getting sewn on together, which is crazy and silly. Overall, this episode was really funny to see, and this episode honestly just feels too short. But they crammed so much in this episode, like, I don't know what else to say. So, we saw Patrick in boating school, we saw Squidward, and now we see Mr. Krabs and Plankton. Who else are we going to see then? Sandy? And man, this episode was much, much better than Boating Buddies that we got in Season 6. This episode is how Boating Buddies should have went. Because, you know, that episode was garbage and all. But this one, it is far away from garbage. Heck, I think it's even better than New Student Starfish from Season 2. And that's saying a lot since New Student Starfish is a pretty good episode as well. But man, you gotta love this one. It's just such a classic. And it's easily one of my favorites as well. Yet again, probably top 20 episodes of all time in SpongeBob. Now let's move on to number 4, which is Karen's Virus. Basically, if SpongeBob was in Random Land 2.0, well, I guess 1.0 since this was before Random Land. Anyway, so Karen catches a virus, which makes her stupid, and oh, guess what? We got to see an opposite character for Karen. Stupid, because Karen's really smart usually. And that is honestly really funny to see. I think it's better than the episode where Sandy is stupid. Anyway, so the only one to save Karen from this virus is SpongeBob. So we get to see a really inventive, I guess, I don't know what you call it, inside of Karen's mind, I guess. And then we got Karen's version of Plankton, who's this big buff guy. And heck, we even got to see Karen's version of Mr. Krabs, Squidward, and SpongeBob as well, which were hilarious to see. And in this episode, you're rooting for Plankton. Plankton is the good guy, which is odd to see, because usually he's the bad guy. Oh yeah, right, we're past one-dimensional stuff. Anything can happen at this point. Finally, SpongeBob gets to stop the virus, because he offers it a Krabby Patty. In the meantime, real Karen is being stupid and crazy and driving Plankton insane. So he's like, "Hurry, SpongeBob!" Like, man, you gotta love everything about this episode. It's just so creative and it's so funny. Like, they really did their homework when it came to seasons 10 and up. Like, really. And again, just another amazing episode. So, let's move on to number 3, which is SpongeBob's Big Birthday Blowout. I mean, of course this is gonna make it to the list. Why wouldn't it? This is an episode focused on SpongeBob's birthday. 20 years in SpongeBob's making, and we get an amazing anniversary episode. It's pretty simple. Patrick takes SpongeBob on a tour around the town with the one tour guide that we've seen in episodes before. I don't know what his name is, so I just always call him the guy who says, "Amazing!" Anyway, so they tour out of town and even out of the water, which turns into Sponge out of water again. We get to see some funny scenes on the beach and, some funny scenes overall. And then, of course, one of the best moments I've ever seen in SpongeBob in a long time happens when they go into the trusty slab. And guess who was working there? You know, Mr. Krabs, SpongeBob, and Squidward. Oh, but it's not themselves, it's Tom Kenny and Roger Bumpus and all the other people who voice the characters. I can't tell you how creatively funny it is to see Tom Kenny and all the other voice actors who do Squidward, SpongeBob, and Mr. Krabs just be there. We see Patrick's voice actor and Sandy's voice actor and even Plankton's voice actor. He comes in and tries to steal the formula, which is funny to see. And apparently the other people who are in the trusty slab as well voice some of the characters in SpongeBob. After getting a meal from a giant Krabby Patty, Slabby Patty, whatever you call it, they end up getting picked up by the person who voices Pearl, and she takes them to a aquarium where Patrick falls in love with a fish, which is stupidly silly, and only season 12 would have some this stupid and silly in it. Meanwhile, Sandy is hosting the party at SpongeBob's house, and she's trying to keep everyone entertained there. And we get to see some silly scenes of everyone fighting because they don't know what to decorate, and so Sandy has to make different sides. Eventually, SpongeBob comes home to everyone sleeping, but guess what? Patchy the Pirate comes in a present, literally just his head for some reason, and wishes SpongeBob a happy birthday, and then the whole crew, along with everyone who fell asleep, get to sing SpongeBob's Birthday Blowout. Oh no, an episode with Patchy the Pirate this far up? Well, no. This is the one episode I don't mind seeing Patchy in, just because, well, we see all the other SpongeBob characters that we've seen in the past, might as well see Patchy as well. Besides, he doesn't overtake the episode like he used to, so that's really nice to see. I'm happy that they're doing better things with Patchy. He's not taking over like 5 minutes of an episode of the special. Anyway, this episode is just ginormously awesome. It's not even an episode, it's a special. This episode is definitely better than Truth and Square that we got from Season 6. And I even think that episode was actually really good too, Truth and Square. It's extremely, extremely underrated. I think the reason why people don't like Truth or Square is just the Patchy moments, which is understandable, but if you skip the Patchy moments, the SpongeBob moments are actually really funny and hilarious to see. But I mean, let's be real here, this is the better anniversary. I love Truth and Square, but this one is better. With this, let's move on to number 2, which is Broken Alarm. This episode is such a goofy one from Season 12. Basically, SpongeBob's alarm clock finally breaks after 20 years of having it. But SpongeBob reassures that that's the only alarm clock that will ever wake him up. So he ends up going to an alarm clock store where they say, yeah, we don't sell that one anymore, but you can look at what we have. So SpongeBob buys all of them to see if one of them will work. And one thing to know about SpongeBob is that he never lies. And of course, all of those alarm clocks that he buys doesn't wake him up. So he ends up making Mr. Krabs upset because he's always late for the Krusty Krab, with Mr. Krabs saying, late, still late. So SpongeBob ends up building a big invention of all the alarm clocks that he bought, where, because, well, they won't wake him up, might as well transport him instead. So these alarm clocks, and he ended up building, was a transportation thing to the Krusty Krab. And he gets to try it out. And would you look at that, he finally isn't late to the Krusty Krab. So now we get to see inside of the Krusty Krab and the inventions that he made there, where we get to see then SpongeBob still sleeping, but the clocks get to do the work. It's funny because during that scene we get some silly background music, which honestly brings some Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves type of song in it. If you listen to the song that plays in the background and then listen to the Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves movie and the music in there, it's kind of similar, which is really super hilarious. Anyway, so Bubble Bass, of course, is the customer who isn't satisfied because it's a pickle situation again, because, you know, of course it is, it's Bubble Bass. So when Squidward returns the order, everything goes chaotic and the whole thing breaks. I kind of forget how this episode ends. I just know Mr. Krabs ends up waking up SpongeBob, and then somehow they end up getting the alarm clock back up and running. I forget. This episode, though, is just plain and simple, and I really love it. It's just such a silly and hilarious episode, and I don't know what it is about it, but I just really love this one. Before we get to number one, let's roll through a decent amount of honorable mentions. Lost and Found. Like I said, I love the mysterious type of episodes. And it's interesting seeing this Lost and Found underneath the Krusty Krab. It's simple. SpongeBob goes into this Lost and Found area to find a teddy fish for this little boy. And then Squidward ends up going down there as well, because why not? SpongeBob finds it, but it's now belonging to a bunch of old people. The episode ends with all of them getting out, except for Squidward, but I guess he gets out at the next episode. This episode is such a creative one. It's cool seeing all the supplies down in the lost area. Just a classic modern episode. The Getaway. Yet again, another good modern Mrs. Puff episode. Basically, SpongeBob drives away with what he thinks is a new driving instructor, but it's really just a guy who broke out of prison. So Mrs. Puff ends up chasing SpongeBob with a guy who was supposed to pick up the guy who snuck out of jail, I guess. And basically we just get a whole bunch of funny scenes, and this turns out to be a really good Season 10 episode. The Incredible Shrinking Sponge. I love episodes that have to do with shrinking or growing. We had stuff like the Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy one, we had the Squidtastic Voyage, and even Giant Squidward. But now we get the Incredible Shrinking Sponge. This one's a really interesting one. It's cool seeing SpongeBob's perspective as a small guy. And I love his meeting with Plankton as well. It's pretty funny to see. And the scene with the kids is funny as well, where they think SpongeBob's an action figure. And then SpongeBob becomes a personal hygiene service because Mr. Krabs notices. And he's like, well, you can't flip patties anymore. Then Squidward accidentally uses SpongeBob as an actual sponge, and SpongeBob goes back to normal. It's just a good classic shrinking type of episode, and yet again, just one of the best from Season 10. Mustard O' Mine. There was just so many good episodes. Like I said, I could make a top 20 on the best episodes from these 3 seasons. Anyway, Mustard O' Mine is an episode focused on SpongeBob, Squidward, and Patrick mining for mustard. Yeah, screw grocery stores. That's back in the day. Nowadays, we mine for mustard. Or maybe that was back in the day. I'm confused. Anyway, it's cool seeing the different stuff that they end up finding, like sand or a random telephone at times as well, or even a secret passage to a train station. And you gotta love how there's apparently a condiment area for mining. Apparently you mine for condiments now. And you gotta love every scene with the escalator as well. I mean, a good, I don't know what I'm saying. It's a funny scene. Then they finally find the condiments where they find stuff like ketchup and mayonnaise and finally mustard. Apparently though the mine is sitting on a mustard mine, so it ends up exploding and now the Krusty Krab has a whole bunch of mustard. So, okay. Yet again, this episode almost feels like a mysterious type of episode, exploring the mines. And yet again, it's just another fun Squidward, SpongeBob, and Patrick collab. And once again, just a really awesome episode from Season 11. Krusty Cleaners. I feel like the modern seasons don't get enough love and praise. They are extremely, extremely underrated. However, if you hear the best episode from modern seasons, a lot of people say Krusty Cleaners is one of them. Anyway, it's plain and simple. SpongeBob spills a spill in a work office area, so he brings Patrick over at night to clean the stain. Unfortunately, they end up making more of a mess than they do cleaning the stain. Then we get to see a bunch of funny moments, like a bunch of robots trying to kidnap them and stuff, and that the company makes tanks, so they end up just bringing a tank in and trying to shoot the robots, which is hilariously funny to see. And you gotta love the one guy who's just there as well, trying to mind his own business and work, and then he finally finishes in the morning. And then they did end up cleaning that spot, but, I mean, the whole building is basically ruined now, so okay. It honestly kind of reminds me of, the one from Season 8 where they're playing golf, but instead of them destroying Squidward's house, they're destroying just a random business place. And it's honestly a lot more refreshing to see than just doing Squidward's house all the time, because like I said, he is no punching bag, he is one of the main characters. Overall, just another good classic Season 11 episode. Goons on the Moon. Why do I feel like the Moon episodes have been getting better as we went on? We started off with Sandy's rocket back in Season 1, which was honestly a pretty bad episode. Sandy was stupidly unlikable in that episode, as she normally was in classic SpongeBob. And SpongeBob and Patrick seemed even more stupider than usual. Then in Season 8, we got Sandy's Mooncation, which was definitely a lot better than Sandy's rocket, where we actually got to see what Sandy probably would have done if she actually got the chance to go to the moon. And it's nice that in this one, at least, unlike Sandy's rocket, she tries to keep her cool and tries to have fun with it, and it's overall a pretty good episode. But Goons on the Moon has to be the best one out of the three, because not only is SpongeBob going to the moon, but Pearl and a girl named Squidina is going as well, whatever her name is. And just for the goofs of it, Squidward is coming along as well, because he's trying to deliver a Krabby Patty, but ends up getting trapped as the rocket's about to launch, so, well, he's going along with them. Also, you gotta love every scene with Squidward in it, where he goes insane while he's in the rocket ship, and then where he gets smushed into his helmet, where he falls into the moon's crater and meets his voice actor, which is a fun breaking the fourth wall moment. And because, why the heck not, frickin' Santa Claus lives on the moon, because he wants to get sleep. And you gotta love how in Santa's book, it has Squidward landing on top of him. That is just such a funny goof, and I love it. Unfortunately, they end up destroying the moon, so now SpongeBob is going to be the moon until Christmas, which is... this episode is just so random and so funny. It's better than Sandy's Mooncation, and it is a lot better than the one from Season 1, whatever that one's called now. Sandy's Rocket. Anyway, good episode. Squid Noir. A noir episode in SpongeBob actually worked! And of course, Squidward was going to be the main character. Basically, Squidward's clarinet got stolen. By who, though? We don't know. Is it SpongeBob, Mr. Krabs, Bubble Bass, Patrick? You never know. Oh, but it's the jellyfish at the end. So Squidward finally gets to play with a few of his friends and the jellyfish. So yet again, it's nice seeing Squidward win at the end, instead of people being like, oh, how dare you play bad music for us. And the whole scene with Squidward and SpongeBob dressing up Mr. Krabs as a girl was stupidly hilarious, and I love it. And I love the action figure scene too, with SpongeBob's action figure versus Bubble Bass's action figure. It's the little things, and this episode is definitely one of the best. Grandmum's the word. So we got a pretty okay episode in Season 7 about Plankton's grandma. This time around, though, in Season 11, we got a much better episode with his grandma in it. Basically, Plankton promised to his grandma that he would own the Krusty Krab by her 90th birthday, which of course didn't happen yet. So, in this episode, Mr. Krabs actually lets Plankton own the Krusty Krab for a day, which is funny, and it almost kind of goes back to the algae is always greener, where Plankton owns the Krusty Krab. Still not as good as that episode, I don't think. Well, I don't think this episode is as good as the algae is always greener. So once Plankton's grandma finally comes, everyone has to pretend that they're Plankton's co-workers. And Plankton is the boss. And you gotta love how Plankton's grandma falls in love with Squidward because, I don't know why, it's so funny. First Bubble Bass's mom and now Plankton's grandma. It's so funny. And by the end of the episode, because this is the Plankton family, Plankton's grandma takes the formula, because she tricks them in taking a picture, and flies away to Shady Shoals. And the episode ends with Mr. Krabs taking the formula back, and all's well and ends well. And it's funny because not even Plankton really wanted the formula in this episode, except when his grandma, I guess, was taking it away at first. All he wanted was for his grandma to have a good 90th birthday. Which is kind of some of the negatives we saw in Single Sale Anniversary from Season 6. I mean, yeah, that episode was awesome and all, but I mean, I feel like Plankton was too obsessive over the formula on that episode. This one, he isn't obsessive over it, which is nice to see. Escape from Beneath Glove World. As I said many times before, any episode with Glove World is automatically a plus. And because Season 12 just had so many awesome episodes, I just barely couldn't put this one on the list. It's nice yet again seeing SpongeBob and Patrick ride some of the rides. It's kind of silly, though, how we still have Glove World, even though in Season 8 we got R.I.P. Glove World and we've gotten Glove Universe. But okay then. Escape from Beneath Glove World is such a hilarious episode. Basically, Patrick breaks an animatronic's head, so they have to go to Glove Jail with a bunch of kids. And we get to see a whole bunch of funny scenes happen. It's almost kind of like, that one episode from Season 10, Lost and Found, almost. Eventually, at the end, they end up defeating the evil animatronic, who apparently is evil. I guess. I don't know, because why not? And they can end up leaving Glove World. Such a good, awesome episode. Like, who would hate this episode? It's such a good one. Dream Hoppers. Wow, another good reclash. Back in Season 1, we got an episode that was kind of similar to this one. Basically, it's when SpongeBob left his own dream and visited everyone else's dream. That episode was alright and all, but it had a few problems. Like, at the end where everyone got mad at SpongeBob and ended up visiting his house just to yell at him, because why not? I feel like that scene was kind of unnecessary. But Dream Hoppers fixes all the problems that I had with that original episode. We don't really get to see all the other dreams this time around, but you know what? I wouldn't want to. They were much more creative this time around when it came to the dreams. Basically, it's SpongeBob's dreaming about a Krabby Patties, and one of them is on the loose. So he ends up in Patrick's dream where they try to get this Krabby Patty back. And I believe that's how the episode goes until either they wake up or they catch it. Like I said, I've only seen Season 12 twice. I do love the part where they're in Squidward's dream and Squidward uses SpongeBob and Patrick as paintbrushes. You know what? This is what they deserve from all these years of torturing Squidward. And now it's karma time. Even though they don't deserve it in this episode, it's still funny to see Squidward happy. Overall, yet again, another awesome episode. Karen's Baby. Okay, I swear, this is the last honorable mention. Then we'll move on to number 1. But anyway, let's talk about this episode first. I feel like a lot of the SpongeBob characters have become so much better now. They're not all one-dimensional anymore, and they just have so much more personalities. Like, for example, I like how we see Karen a lot more now. Remember back in season 1 where she was only in like 2 episodes? Now she's in like half of the episodes, and that is a lot better. So in this episode, they have a baby. Well, I guess Karen orders a baby, which is silly. Plankton doesn't really want anything to do with the baby, but when he's forced to, he at least attempts to help out. Eventually, their baby grows up until he's a teenager, and he starts just doing things like cussing and stuff, which is silly to see in SpongeBob, because you wouldn't think they'd do that. Well, I guess we did get Sailor's Mouth back in season 2, but that's a different story. The episode ends with their baby becoming a big ATM now, and doing what he does best, making sure Mr. Krabs gets tortured, just like any of the other Plankton family. It's such a silly episode, and one of my favorites. But not my favorite. Now let's move on to my favorite episode, which is Krusty Catering. Oh man, you gotta love how chaotic this episode is. It starts off silly, where Mr. Krabs, Squidward, SpongeBob, and Patrick are serving Krabby Patties to a bunch of kids at a birthday party. While Squidward is handing out these gross Krabby Patties to children, Patrick's making balloon animals for the children, and SpongeBob's acting like a bouncy house until he ends up getting popped by one of the children, and Mr. Krabs is just kind of there to experience it all. Also, like I said, it's the minor things, but I love how the piñata is just Plankton. So then birthday boy Billy and his friends torture Mr. Krabs by beating him up. It's just so stupid and silly, and I love it. It's like a much better Krabby Land from Season 3. That episode was bad, but this one is actually really good. Heck, it's beyond good. By this point, they had enough of the kids, so now they're turning into professional caterings. They all dress up with the help of Squidward, if you've seen this episode, and they help this rich lady by catering, I guess. Why? Because Mr. Krabs gets $1 million check, I believe it is. Anyway, so they go in, and Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob to fancy up the food. So when SpongeBob comes back with a bunch of jewels, Mr. Krabs actually does something that you wouldn't normally see him do. He clearly says, "You can't steal jewels." Normally Mr. Krabs would be like, "Haha, thanks for stealing these jewels." But no, he's actually being the good guy here and saying, "No, we can't just steal jewels." So then a bunch of chaotic things happen, like SpongeBob and Patrick try to serve Krabby Patties, and then Squidward tries to fit in with a band just because they have a clarinet. And Mr. Krabs tries to get rid of Billy the birthday boy, who somehow keeps teleporting over to this building that they're in. Apparently Patrick then goes gorilla mode and starts, I guess, tearing up the food because he likes it so much. So then Mr. Krabs returns the jewels because, apparently now he's nice and finally understands that you can't just steal things. And somehow, even after Mr. Krabs throws Billy the birthday boy out the door and away from the house, he comes back and wants his birthday cake from Mr. Krabs, which is super funny. And apparently will set off a lot of fireworks if Mr. Krabs doesn't. But Mr. Krabs explains that no, little boys just don't set off fireworks whenever they feel like it. Which then leads to an interestingly sad moment where Billy says that, well, he never had anyone to say that to him. And apparently now Mr. Krabs is his father, which is funny. So Mr. Krabs then finds a waterbed, and on top is none other than Billy the birthday boy, who wants his new daddy to play with him. While Mr. Krabs tries to stop him, he ends up popping the waterbed, and it ends up exploding. Meanwhile, everyone's having a food fight at this point, and food lands on this rich lady who gets mad and joins in as well. And then a bunch of chaotic things happen, and then the house gets flooded. Kind of like the Krusty Towers did in Season 4. Honestly, though, I think this episode is just better than Krusty Towers. I'm not saying Krusty Towers is bad in any way, but this one is just so chaotically funny, and I love it. Towards the end, Billy finally gets his birthday cake, and that kid at the beginning that we see with the balloons is just floating away at the end. It's such an awesome episode. I don't know what to say. This episode is just so funny and hilarious, and not only is it my favorite episode from Season 10, or heck, not even my favorite episode from Seasons 10, 11, and 12, but I could probably consider this episode my favorite SpongeBob episode of all time. And that's saying a lot. There is 13 seasons, and Krusty Catering just has to be my favorite episode. I just love the chaos in this episode. And overall, I love a lot of the chaos we got in a lot of these newer seasons. I like a lot of the callbacks to the original seasons, which make the episodes better, and even if they're remaking episodes like Dream Hoppers or Goons on the Moon, for an example. Overall, I think the modern SpongeBob has heavily improved, and I'm not going to say what seasons I like better than others, because I'm going to save that for my next video, where I rank all the seasons. Well, except for 13, because, I mean, that wouldn't be fair, the season's not even done yet. But with that, I hope you enjoyed my video, and as I said, I've ranked every episode already on my other channel, which has just recently reached 100 subscribers. Thank everybody. So if you want to see my second channel, it's in my community posts. I hope you enjoyed not just this video, but all the other SpongeBob Top 10s. They were fun to do. And so I will see you next time. Bye.